Our whole economy gets turned upside down when the price of gasoline goes up. Your personal economy, many of you probably, when gas goes up suddenly, you have to cut back on something else. But our whole nation struggles with this. It's not sustainable. I'm submitting we need to find a better way. We do this deep water drilling, and then when we have accidents because we don't bother to put redundancy in the system, we cause some very significant environmental problems. And I would argue we have gone to war at least a few times in my lifetime to maintain access to cheap oil. I think a lot of people are suffering for war that could have been avoided. And that's out of order. Coal is the big deal for me in Kentucky, but you have coal in southern Indiana too. It was in today's newspaper today that a state legislator in Kentucky, who's also the chair of the Energy Committee, brokered a deal with the governor with an Indian company to sell 9 million tons of coal a year for the next 25 years. And it's like, man, it's just, I don't even like to think about it. It's depressing. But this is Appalachia. This is part of my heritage in my mind. Unless you came from around there, you may not see it as your heritage, but I don't need to tell you it's beautiful. But this is what we're doing to get the coal out more cheaply. We're just tearing them down, and then we rebuild it like that. I'm sorry, that's ugly, and I'm an engineer, and I wouldn't want to live at the bottom of that for fear that somebody didn't actually construct it safely and that it's going to come down in an earthquake. So, this is to show you who's putting the most greenhouse gases out. China passed us up just a few years ago. It's even higher now. This data is from 2010. It's a little bit worse now. I will submit to you, though, that China is not opening up a new coal-fired power plant or two per week for just their own needs. They're becoming the manufacturer for the whole world, and you could argue part of their bar belongs on the rest of our bars. But scientists would often say, you know, you should look at data in different ways, and so this is what I think is interesting. If you normalize the data on population, then it completely changes. And it shows that this very populous nation actually isn't emitting very much per capita, and we are, and the Canadians are at least as bad as we are as well. There's the world average. Okay, enough of the guilt trip, negative stuff. I just wanted to get your attention. Everybody wants to know what's the solution, singular. It doesn't exist. This is what exists. We have silver buckshot. If we are willing to put together a patchwork of all different solutions, we can solve the problem. In 1943, this is downtown Louisville. It's at the corner of 4th and Chestnut, if any of you have been there. It's looking north. You can't see 2 blocks away. This is in the middle of the day, and that automobile has its headlights on. Sounds like Pittsburgh, eh? It wasn't much better than Pittsburgh. Now, why was that happening? Because, and by the way, this was the ambient conditions. This is the same airplane on the same day. This is what downtown looked like. And why would that be so bad? It's because where they just built the new arena, if you've heard about it, the Yum Center, which my boyfriend calls the Yuck Center, because it is kind of ugly. There was a power plant here that had no emissions control. They burned coal and put all that smoke out. And if the atmosphere held the smoke down, that's what it looked like. In 1933, they calculated that the average Louisvillian inhaled 1 1/2 cups of soot per year. And when they did autopsies and opened us up, we looked like coal miners. Our lungs were so black. And eventually, they began to be willing to regulate industry a little bit, weekly. And then, but the railroads, and Louisville was a big railroad hub, it still is to some degree, they decided that they couldn't afford to have big gaps of air between these big chunks of coal in the train. It was much more efficient to fill that tank up with diesel fuel, and then they could haul longer and faster. So they switched on their own because of market forces. But politicians could never bring themselves to regulate home furnaces. Most homes burned coal, and they didn't have any emissions control. But the politicians weren't willing to make them use cleaner anthracite, so we just kept plugging along and not getting our air pollution problem. It got to where we were the 3rd most polluted city in the United States. And you know what finally solved it, besides the trains deciding market forces and industry deciding it was more efficient to quit wasting this coal they were buying? It was that housewives decided the term spring cleaning meant you washed everything from the ceiling to the floor, you laundered everything you could because it was covered full of soot. And they're kind of like, this sucks, I don't want to keep doing this. And to get natural gas or electric heat means the risk of your house burning down plummeted, and you didn't have to constantly shovel out all these dirty ashes, and nobody had to get up in the morning into a cold house to build the fire to warm it up before everybody else got up. And so as a matter of convenience and safety and cleanliness, we just flipped from 1940 to 1960, and 40, almost everybody, 90% of the people were burning coal, and by 1960, only about 10%, the 90% were burning natural gas or electricity. So my point is this: we went from a very bad situation to a much, much better situation by way of personal choice and people doing what was good for them. And yes, people were motivated to have healthier air too. So my hope is that we can be smart enough to sidestep calamity from climate change for our own vested interest, to create jobs, to save money. I don't care, but this is an example of what I want to show you, all the different ways that it would be in our self-interest to stop polluting so much greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So yeah, what I want to emphasize is when you use fossil fuels more efficiently, you're reducing pollution, but you're also saving at your electrical meter. You're saving at the gas pump. You're saving at the natural gas meter if you heat with natural gas. Do y'all have natural gas here? I bet you do. Yeah. Okay. I cannot emphasize enough that when we install solar panels, the Chinese can't do that for us. When we install a more energy efficient furnace, the Mexicans can't do that for us. When we go in and we insulate attics and walls, the Indians can't do that for us. We would have to create jobs in order to do this. These are the kind of jobs that tend to have benefits besides workers' comp. It would probably have vacation, probably would have a livable wage. It's jobs the middle class could do, needs to do. Our middle class is really struggling for jobs. I don't need to tell you all these things, but that's what I think is cool about it. The other thing I think is cool about it is traditional economic development in this country has been we woo a factory to go set up somewhere and then people take the jobs. And sometimes small towns get a little bit of crumbs, but mainly it's the big cities that get those factories. This kind of stuff, installing renewables and making homes more efficient, has to happen in New Harmony. It has to happen in Bedford, Indiana. It's got to happen in Hazard, Kentucky, Madisonville, Kentucky. It's got to happen everywhere, which is a good thing and a reason why we need to embrace it. So let's look at some examples. If we keep on going as we are, by 2050, this is where our greenhouse gas emissions would be. And then this is the part we could save just by using electricity more efficiently. So, for example, what would Mom say? Right. We don't really need to show off. And I will say, you all seem to be doing very well at that. Nobody seems to be lit up just to show off. That's probably the small town thing. At where I come from, it's amazing the number of people have these big floodlights on their churches and their houses to show them off. If you use a ceiling fan, in the summer, you can raise the air conditioner, most people, by 2 degrees, the thermostat. If you use it on low in the winter and you don't sit right in the draft, you can usually lower the thermostat by 2 degrees. I want to emphasize why this is so important, particularly in the summer. Most of us don't live in a huge household anymore. I'm the oldest of 6. I grew up in a house with 8 people, and you can bet there was somebody in every room because we didn't have a very big house. But most of us now, we're generally occupying 1 or 2 rooms in the house and it's otherwise empty. If you're uncomfortable in one room and you go adjust the thermostat for you or maybe one other person, you're conditioning the whole house for just what you need in one space. So if a ceiling fan makes you more comfortable in one room and you don't have to raise or lower the thermostat for air conditioning for the whole house, that's a big savings. If you get a programmable thermostat, you don't have to get up to a cold house in the morning. You can program it that I want to get up at this time, therefore I want it to be this temperature. You can have it automatically set back for when you go to work or school so that you're not burning all that energy during the day. You can have it back up where you want it when you get home, and most importantly, you can have it go down or up, depending on which it is, when you go to sleep. Human lungs were not designed to be in dry, warm air 24/7. And in Louisville, and I bet you all too, we have a fair number of people with allergies and asthma and COPD. Those people would all fare better if they slept in cooler air. Most people won't set it back if they have to get up to a cold house. This magic solution takes care of that. Energy efficient lighting, and I must report that you don't have it here. See how your fluorescent lamps are about 1.5 inches in diameter? Those are called T12s. These are T8s. They're only 1 inch in diameter. They use 25% less energy than those. If you also change out the ballast from electromagnetic to electronic, you end up with a 40% reduction all told. But the other cool thing is that they have less mercury, but the other cool thing is that their color rendition index is much more accurate. So, at the end of the summer, when my hair's starting to turn green from swimming, it doesn't look nearly as green with these lights as it does with these lights. So, and you know, the other little secret is if you ever go to a salad bar, like in a big chain restaurant, how the carrots look so red. Have you ever noticed that? And the broccoli looks so green? It's because they use these lights, which just bring out the colors, you know. Oh, by the way, the first place that started to use these lights way back, my mother's a painter, and so she bought these because back in the 80s because it made the colors on her canvases be more accurate. But there was only one place in Louisville that sold them, and they told her that department stores were the only people who were embracing this, and here's why. People would pick out a couple of outfits and go into the dressing room and put them on and stand in front of the mirror with that light, and they'd go, "Oh, I look so good in this color." And they saw clothing sales jump 40%. And the other thing is, oh, by the way, they last forever, like, 10 years instead of 2, which means less work, less disposal. So anyway, you all know what these are now, compact fluorescent lamps. Some people are concerned that they do contain mercury, and they do. And I don't want anybody to drop them inside the house. That's not a good thing. But if you take good care of them, let me explain that when we burn coal, we put mercury into the atmosphere because mercury is embedded in coal. And this lamp uses 1/4 of the electricity of the old incandescent. So if you compare the mercury here, if you were to be a real jerk and go out on that sidewalk and smash it and put all that mercury in the atmosphere, it's less mercury than you would put in the atmosphere if you burned 4 times the electricity for the incandescent bulb. So please don't not use this because of mercury. However, if you don't want to do mercury, it is increasingly available now that you can get these LED lights.